Good morning, colleagues. Turn Guahan is back from recess. Again, we left off on second reading on amended bill number 97-37 COR. There was an amendment by Senator Perez, and Senator San Augustine recently had an amendment to that amendment. So on the amendment to the amendment, Senator San Augustine, were you going to?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to withdraw that amendment, and after consultation with legal, we've come up with a better amendment at this point. I'd like to withdraw that amendment, then I can reintroduce the other amendment.
All right. On the motion to withdraw the original amendment to the amendment by Senator San Augustine, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. On the amendment, sorry, you have a new amendment, Senator?
Yes, Madam Speaker. The new amendment, basically, if you look at the current amendment, which is an amendment to the amendment, it restores back the on line where it's as jurisdiction. We restored the word jurisdiction, and we continue on with the original amendment, but we add the agreement with the agreement with the Inalon Mayor and Inalon Municipal Planning Council as caretaker of the historic site relating to the Inalon Baptist Church, and ultimately a memorandum of agreement with the Guam Preservation Trust to ensure GBTs and so forth. And then further down, we authorize the staying with her amendment, to the original amendment, but adding on that the Government of Guam to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the Inalon Mayor and Inalon Mayor's Council for the jurisdictional authority over lot 106-1, block 12 in Inalon, Guam. The Inalon Mayor and the Inalon Municipal Planning Council shall enter into a memorandum of agreement with the Guam Preservation Trust relating to that same lot. Thank you.
Thank you. So everyone should have a copy on their desk of the amendment. This one we'll take first the amendment to the legislative intent. Lines 7 to 26 and 1 through 7, pages 2 and 3. On that amendment, is there anyone who'd like to speak? There being no objection, is there any objection to the amendment to the amendment? Seeing no objection, motion carries. On the original amendment as amended. On the original amendment as amended. Would the sponsor like to close? We're back from recess. Senator Perez, you had the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to thank my colleagues for their spirit of collaboration to getting to a solution that protects the real property of the government of Guam and also at the same time moves forward to rehabilitating one of our historic sites and to help support the Inalahan Village to further their attempts to improve and beautify their village. So thank you. Yeah, I think that concludes my statement for the bill. Thank you.
All right, there was an outstanding amendment for the actual substance of the bill, section 2. Is that withdrawn, or that wasn't offered? That will not be offered? Okay. All right, then on the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Blas, you are recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's just, in review of the bill, just in the legislative intent, and I'm sorry I don't have the copy of the bill in front of me. My internet's still down. However, it makes reference to give me a second, Madam Speaker. I'm trying to find it. There it is. Actually, if you go back to the amendment that we had just disposed of, in the second paragraph, which is also consistent with what is in the bill, near the bottom of the second paragraph, it says, for the purpose of stabilizing and restoring its historical structure that has been a public concern for its hazardous state and comprising the safety of and well-being of local residents. I don't know whether the word comprising is supposed to be comprising or is it supposed to be compromising. So if the question to the author of the bill, is that word supposed to be comprising or compromising?
Would the author yield? Would the author of the bill, Senator Kanata, would you yield to the question? Would you please restate your question, Senator Blas?
And I'm going by what's on the amendment, but it is in the bill. In the second paragraph, it says, and I'll start from formerly known as the Inalahan Baptist Church, Municipality of Inalahan, Guam, for the purpose of stabilizing and restoring its historical structure that has been a public concern for its hazardous state and comprising the safety and well-being of local residents and visitors of Inalahan Village. Is the word comprising or is it supposed to be compromising?
Would the author yield?
I think it's compromising. Spell check. We can have legal make the revision.
No, it can't have because you're looking at two different. It's
You
got to
have
be
the floor,
amended.
Senator Blas.
We can make an amendment.
Okay. I'll leave it to him, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill?
On the main motion, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized?
Mr. Speaker, can we clarify with legal who has spoken so we'll know
Sure.
who can speak, and then we just go down the line?
Nangafan?
We're back from recess. We were still on Bill number 97-37 COR. Majority Leader, Senator San Augustine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to temporarily suspend the discussion on Bill number 97-37 until COR until Friday at 10 o'clock. Okay, there's no objection.
There's a motion to suspend discussion on this amended bill until Friday at 10 a.m. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
But Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to go back to motions.
There's a motion to go back to motions. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're back on motions.
Madam Speaker, I move to append resolution number 229-37 LS to today's session's journal.
Can you read the title, please? This is the resolution for the late Judge Pinco.
That's correct. It's in reference to the...
All right. On that motion to append that resolution onto our agenda onto the journal?
Correct, onto the session journal.
Onto the session journal. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. All right. There being no other motions, we are returning to second reading. And we're back on the next item on our agenda is Bill number 113-37 COLS. Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to place Bill number 113-37, an act to amend subsection 3103P of Article 1, Chapter 3, Title 17, Guam Code annotated, relative to restoring the Guam Department of Education management audit requirements onto the third reading fund. I'd like to discuss.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Bill number 113-37 is really a very simple bill that aims to correct, in my opinion, Public Law 3191, which had started here many legislatures back as Bill 150-31, and in the bill that was introduced, the word audit was in place in this bill, but on the floor, the word audit was substituted with the word assessment, and that version of the bill was eventually passed into public law. And that's kind of the gist of this measure, Madam Speaker, is that as long as the word assessment is used, it can really mean any number of things to the Guam Department of Education. But I think what we're really striving for here is the word audit. And so, as I said, there's an existing management audit law that's in place, and all this bill does is strike the word assessment and put back the word audit in there. And the last time a management audit was conducted of the Guam Department of Education was Haggis Antes Guantes in 2009. Evergreen Solutions was hired to conduct a management audit of the Guam. At that time, that's how far back the last management audit was done, is it was called the Guam Public School System back then. Florida-based Evergreen Solutions had performed a management audit, 399-page audit report, stated that GPSS could, over the next 5 years, realize a savings of over $156 million. And some of the recommendations made in that audit included eliminating excess elementary teaching positions, excess general and one-to-one school aid positions, as well as eliminating up to 18 assistant principal positions, just to name a few. Other recommendations included overhauling GPSS maintenance operations thoroughly, as well as the closure of FQ Sanchez Elementary School, which would subsequently have students absorbed over to the neighboring village of Moleso and Moleso Elementary School. At the time this audit was released, the then chairperson of the Legislative Committee on Education, former Speaker Judy Wampat, agreed with many of the audit's findings. I'll just quote a couple media reports here. The former speaker had said they are correct. There are definitely many ways in which there could be savings in the department. GPSS is becoming now, I guess, like what people always dub the government of Guam, is becoming now almost as if though it's an employment agency now. We just have to look, in a brief cursory look, how much we spend even with special ed dollars, with one-to-one aids. It's a lot more than any other state has actually spent on that. The audit, again, recommended the elimination of up to 18 assistant principal positions. Last night I was perusing the GDOE website. There are currently 47 assistant principals in the department. And again, I'll quote the legislative chair back then, former Speaker Wampat, that said, "I remember when I was a school principal, I had about 1,000 students and I only had one assistant principal and it ran smoothly." And so again, as we welcome the new superintendent, Swanson, to the helm of the Guam Department of Education, it's no doubt it's been a very rough ride in his first few months on the job, but we have seen some successes with the lifting of the third-party fiduciary, and one of the conditions with the lifting of that third-party fiduciary is that the Guam Department of Education must undergo a reorganization, and that's going to mean some big changes. I met with the superintendent last week, and these are changes that we've been talking about over the last few years, and it kind of seems like this superintendent may be in the position to implement some of these changes. And we're talking about consolidation of school populations, which would eventually mean the closure of several campuses on island. I know that he's also looking at the number of administrative staff that we have on hand relative to the decreases in enrollment. And so we have seen a significant decreases in enrollment at the Guam Department of Education. I think somewhere media reports have stated it as high as 7,000 students have left the Guam Department of Education. And if you look at some of the materials that have been supplied by GDOE management to the Board of Education, you'll see that school-to-school enrollment has dropped, and a lot of that is attributed to people leaving the island, and then also public school students migrating over to our charter school system. And so with these changes being implemented and the lifting of the third-party fiduciary, I think the time is actually perfect to reinstate the management audits, because we can allow for hopefully for the superintendent to implement these sweeping changes across the department, and then we hopefully pass this measure, re-implement the management audit, and then we perform that audit in the next fiscal year and see how these changes have affected the efficiency of the department and obviously the cost of education on our island. And with that being said, I humbly ask the support of my colleagues. I hope that the debate and discussion on this bill will go much smoother than the previous bill. And I did have an amendment that I'll go ahead and proffer that now. And this would add a new Section 3 to the bill to read. Actually, so there's a mistake. That should say first, I think. Or just the audit. We'll strike cost. Yeah. First. Let's put first. Thank you, Senator. And so and you can just technically correct that, ma'am? Okay.
Would you please address this chair?
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Let me know what your amendment is.
Okay, I'm sorry. So it's the amendment is to add a new Section 3 to the bill to read. Section 3, effective fiscal year 2024. The scope of the first management audit is for fiscal year 2024. And then the second sentence, it says the cost audit, but I'm going to strike cost and put first, and then it would then read, the first audit shall be funded in the fiscal year 2025 budget. The anticipated target completion date is June 30th, 2025.
All right. Would you like to speak on that amendment? We're going to accept it with your change.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it speaks for itself. I know that one of my colleagues had asked me the question offline about when we'd be looking at conducting this audit and what the audit period would be, and also how we would fund it. And I think that this amendment neatly encapsulates all those questions and concerns. And so again, I humbly ask for my colleagues' support, not just for the bill as a whole, but for the amendment that I'm proffering. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. On the amendment, is there any senator who'd like to be recognized? Senator Blas on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, Madam Speaker, in the introduction of the bill, one of the things that I was very much interested in is how we were going to pay for this. But then when I'm looking here at the proposed amendment, the scope of the first management audit is for fiscal year 2024. The audit shall be funded by fiscal year 2025 budget. What is the difference between the scope of the first management audit and the audit in the first sentence, and then the audit in the second sentence? The concern that I have here is, again, we're going to go out and ask somebody to do an audit in 2024 and not pay them until 2025?
Would you like the sponsor to yield?
Yes, please.
Would the sponsor yield to the question?
I'm sorry, the intent of the amendment is that the auditing period would be fiscal year 2024, and that we would conduct that audit at the beginning of FY25, and it would be funded out of fiscal year 25 with the anticipated target completion date of June 30th, 2025, ma'am.
So you're going to take the actions of what happened in 2024, but then audit it in 2025 and use the funds. So your audit is not going to be real time, your audit is going to be retrospect. How do you do that? It's not to take away, I appreciate it, I understand the intent. It's just that I just don't know if the wording is proper here so that it can be, so what our intent is not articulated properly. That's the concern that I have with this language. Because it's obviously two different actions. I mean, you may want to take a break, have him discuss with legal. Please, recess. Thank you.
Yes, we're still, so Senator Blas concluded. Please proceed.
Ma'am, I don't think I can proceed any further without any clarification from the author.
Would you like the sponsor to yield?
Yes, please.
Would the sponsor yield to the question? Would you please restate your question, Senator Blas?
Well, again, there's obviously two different actions, two different sentences, two different actions. But I know what your intent is and what you want to be able to do. I just don't know whether we're able to do this based on how this is written, how this is presented.
Would the sponsor yield?
I'm not sure what the question
Well,
is.
as it stands, Madam Speaker.
Senator Blas, would you please restate your question?
You know, Madam Speaker, as it stands right now, I mean, I don't want to be, this is a very ambiguous amendment the way it is. I know what the intent is, but it's not reading that way. And let's not assume that just because we have this discussion here, that this discussion is actually going to be interpreted as the intent when it is actually come into law. This has to be this has to be clear.
Ma'am,
Would the sponsor
Chair.
yield to the question?
yeah, I would like to have a moment's recess. I mean, I feel like the intent is very clear, but if there's a word here or two that I can add or take out, then I'd just like to have a short recess to do that, ma'am.
We'll take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Senator Blas, you had the floor.
Thank you very much for the recess, Madam Speaker. There was collaboration in that one. Madam Speaker, to be able to make sure that this sounds, that it fits, is I want to make an amendment to the amendment here, and it'll read, the scope of the first management audit is for fiscal year 2024, comma, and the audit, cross out the words the cost and replace it with, and the audit shall be funded in the fiscal year 2025 budget.
All right. There's an amendment to after fiscal year 2024, add a comma and add the words and
the audit.
And it will continue with the first audit. So it will read fiscal year 2024, comma, and the first audit shall be funded in FY 2025.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any objection to taking that without it being in writing? Is there any objection? If not, we're going to consider that without it being in writing. On the amendment.
I just have
Senator San Augustine on the amendment?
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I just have a comment on that one that all we did was we changed the period to a comma. We didn't need that. Already the author of the amendment said that the first audit, exactly what you just read. The difference is just a period and a comma. I don't see any, gosh, we wasted 5 minutes for just that?
No, we didn't waste 5 minutes, Madam
Thank
Speaker,
you.
okay, and I think this is a very good.
Senator San Augustine has the floor. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the amendment? Senator Taitigui on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm speaking on the amendment to the amendment, which, many times it's mistaken on verbiage. Did they mean this? Did they mean that? Well, let's simplify it. And that's exactly what this amendment to the amendment does. It just simplifies it to make it clear and precise. And actually, it's much smoother, as a full sentence than breaking it down, interpreting that it may change on the next sentence. So, I'm in full support of the amendment, and it's very clear. That's all it's doing, to make it very clear, so that anybody interpreting this knows exactly what we want. So thank you, Madam Chair, our Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment to the amendment, Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Thank you. I rise in support of the easiest amendment to the amendment ever, and I thank the author of the amendment for the bipartisan collaboration, and I also commend his diligence in weeding out the possibilities of my original amendment. So thank you, and I like the spirit of working together to address these issues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment to the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? If not, then the sponsor of the amendment to the amendment, Senator Blas, you may close. He's waiving closure. So on the amendment to the amendment, which is to add a comma after 2024, add the word and. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Motion passes. Senator Blas, you still have the floor. You done? All right. On the Barnett amendment as amended, Senator Taitigui, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this amendment. I truly believe that now DOE, which they're trying their best, nothing stops us, though, to continue to, keep the fire to their feet, as well as making sure they're transparent and that accountability, most especially, is in place for this. We're losing our third-party fiduciary, thank goodness. They're showing some strides toward DOE and their management skills with funding. But I truly believe that every entity on this island, most especially DOE, that receives the most funding from our general fund, should have this type of audit in place. I don't understand why it was ever let go. Maybe because there was a third-party fiduciary. But as mentioned earlier, they're no longer going to be here overseeing us. Then it becomes our responsibility. This is our responsibility for the funding that we give to DOE and to ensure that money has been spent correctly and have documentation to notify that, because it's going to help them in the future when they go after federal funds. This audit will help. So I thank you for this bill and ask the sponsor to be a co-sponsor of this for the sake of accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment to the bill as amended, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? If not, then the sponsor may close on the amendment as amended. Waives closure. Is there any objection to the amendment as amended? Any objection? Seeing no objection, motion. Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're still on the bill. Senator Barnett, you still have the floor on the bill. Pardon? No, I'm sorry, you don't. Senator Blas had the floor. No, he didn't. You made an amendment. You had the floor. Okay, so is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator San Agustin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And for my colleagues here, in 2009, I was the chairman of the Board of Education, and we were pursuing Evergreen's management audit. And at the time, there was not enough, I hate to put it this way, there was not enough guts in this body back then to change it, to make sure that audit was implemented. The only thing they pursued was closing FQ Sanchez when all they had to do was rearrange the employees and they wouldn't have closed it. I brought that up. And then as they moved on, and I'm very thankful that the author of the bill introduced it, make it an audit. I'm just hoping the current superintendent will go into Evergreen's recommendation and start implementing what happened in 2009, because many of those items that they have addressed is still applicable today. This management audit coming up, more than likely is going to reveal the same thing, and back then we had over 33,000 kids. Now we're down to, less than 7,000 or 8,000, and we're at 22 now, almost 10,000 kids. So I thank the author for this bill, and I look forward to the Department of Education superintendent. Take action. Quit making excuses. Quit claiming something that you could fix today. Thank you, and I ask the author if he can include me as co-sponsor.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill as amended, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? If not, then the sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you. I thank my colleagues for this smooth discussion on this bill. And it also, is there anyone else who would like to be added as a co-sponsor? Okay. So Senator Taitagui, Senator San Agustin, and then everyone else down the line. Day. And I think
on that motion to accept to add sponsors, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
I also thank Senator Blas for his great amendment to the amendment, and also my colleagues for their support of this measure. Sidos Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sidos Masi.
Oh, and I move to place the bill number 113-37 into the
third reading file.
Yeah, third reading file.
On the motion to place the bill as amended into the third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We are now on resolution number 29-37 COR. Senator Lujan, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. Madam Speaker, I motion to place resolution 29-37 COR relative to requesting the U.S. Congress to appropriate monies for Guam non-military residents who were exposed to Agent Orange and who are suffering from ailments caused by the exposure to Agent Orange. That's, again, Resolution 2934 CR on the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on it.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much again. Morning again, Madam Speaker and colleagues. I ask that all my colleagues join me in voting unanimously, unanimous voting for Resolution 29-37 CR. This body should, of course, pass it unanimously. In 2022, the U.S. Congress passed, and President Biden signed the law, the PACT Act, recognizing the federal government
recognizing the federal government had responsibility to not only acknowledge U.S. personnel stationed on Guam and other locations could have been exposed to the harmed by Agent Orange, and that those who should be compensated. I think it's an understatement to say that it was a long and hard-fought battle to get to this point. It was a real struggle to get our national government or the federal government to take responsibility and provide just compensation. And over many, many years before its passage in 2022, there were lots of times that it seemed recognition and the possibility of compensation will never be realized. Now the acknowledgement and the right to compensation for those in the U.S. military who were exposed and who did suffer had been realized. Now, our federal government, our national government, finally agreed to do the right thing. But we can't rest because the battle is not over for everyone. For some, the battle continues. For those in Guam and other locations who were exposed and suffered because of the exposure to Agent Orange, but who were not members of the United States military, still remain left behind. They remain neglected to this day. They have received no justice, no acknowledgement, and certainly no compensation. So my resolution asks that the federal government and the Biden administration, the U.S. Congress, take the next and final step and include this group of worthy patriots. I want the federal government to extend the benefits, the acknowledgement, and the opportunity for compensation for those exposed on Guam, those who suffered because of this exposure to Agent Orange, who were not members of the U.S. military, to be eligible. I want them treated with the same dignity. That is what Resolution 29-37 asks for. The resolution declares it is the position of this body that this group of people deserve the same acknowledgement and the same recognition, the same justice as the members of the U.S. Armed Forces who were stationed on Guam receive. We are simply standing up and stating for the record that any resident of Guam who falls into the same category deserves the same respect. We are asking the federal government, or our national government, to take the last and final step on this journey, to include any resident of Guam who was exposed and suffered. It is not just an honorable and worthy veterans of the U.S. military who were exposed on Guam who deserve justice. As I said, this resolution should receive unanimous support. All members of the 37th Guam Legislature should support this, and I ask for the support to request that the statement of our official position for our non-military people who were exposed to Agent Orange and suffered from it deserve equality and justice in recognition and compensation. With that, Madam Speaker, I thank you, and I ask my colleagues to support Resolution 29-37 COR. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the resolution, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized?
On the resolution, is there anyone who would like to speak on the resolution? Speaker Terlau, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. I'd like to stand in support of this resolution that will be sent to Congress, asking them to acknowledge as well that the civilians of Guam are also exposed to Agent Orange. And I'd like, in doing so, to acknowledge those who came before us, who advocated very strenuously, even before the PACT Act, and every single term of the legislature for maybe the last decade, that compiled testimonies from both veterans and civilians who lived in Guam as to the exposure of those on Guam to Agent Orange. Exposure of civilians who were working on the bases, exposure of the veterans, of course, exposure of civilians who worked along the pipelines, civilians who worked in field depots, civilians who worked in even offices because they were spraying around their offices and along the fence lines. And as you know, these fuel lines and fence lines, they are all throughout Guam. So there's still people today who come up to us and tell us about the suffering of their family members or the death of their family members, and that they fully believe that the suffering that was upon them was as a result of being exposed to Agent Orange. So there have been resolutions after resolutions in the legislature prior to passage of the PACT Act to recognize and create a presumption for veterans. Those resolutions were sponsored by almost all the senators, led by the late Vicente Ben Pangilinan, Senator Jim Espaldon, Speaker B.J. Cruz. And I want to especially point out, I think a lot of these efforts began with research done by Mr. Robert Celestio. And he's suffering right now from some of the injuries he received, but he always, even in his pain and suffering, continues to advocate that all the people of Guam are going to be recognized for their exposure to contamination, including Agent Orange. And so I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that today and acknowledge all of those who for years have, despite Congress and the military denying that exposure in previous years, that they continue to advocate, not just for veterans, and they continue to compile a record. And the veterans and the civilians continue to come in to the Guam Legislature and put on the record what they witnessed. So I want to thank all of them for their work on this. Thank the sponsors of this bill, this resolution, and I fully support this resolution, and I hope that it will, that Congress will take heed. Si Diyos masi.
On the main motion, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the main motion? Senator San Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in full support of this amendment, this resolution. And I'm happy to identify 1958, where some of you weren't born yet, but to 2000, that they move forward. I just hope Congress would get out of their gridlock so they can provide the funding that's needed for Guam. Because they're in a mess right now as it is. We need their support, and I hope that all other colleagues are added on to that list from the author of the resolution. Thank you. Full support of the resolution.
Thank you, Senator. On the resolution, Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I certainly rise in support of this resolution to recognize those in our community, in our local community, that were affected or exposed to Agent Orange. I attended this public hearing, and certainly it was a reminder to me, because many of those that testified actually were of my father's generation, who actually worked with my dad at SRF. And seeing them there to testify, is a very personal feeling, because you recognize that these were members of our community that have worked many years on the base. And now in their later years, while we all, as we get older, obviously, we suffer the aches and pains of aging. You add additional layers of health problems that fall on top of that, and it makes it a very difficult process. I experienced that with my father, who was in the Navy for many years. Hen was exposed. He worked at SRF for quite a number of years and retired as a head of his Shop 72. I always remember that, Shop 72. So my dad went to the Navy from being in charge of the harbor there to retiring and going back, working for civil service for another 20 years after. And many of his coworkers down there were also challenged and exposed. And here they are now in their senior years, suffering predominantly, many of them, from cancer. And that's a challenge, you know, especially to have to encounter these ailments and not necessarily, if you're not retired, if you don't have the health care benefits that come with being a military retiree, or you're not a veteran that has 100% disability, and my father was both of those. You know, it's a challenge to have to suffer through this, and on top of that, the medical bills that come with it, that you don't get support for, that take away from other things that you would like to provide for your family. And it's only, you know, all these years later, you know, we look at today and it's so beautiful and sunny outside, and, you know, this is as close to paradise as we can get. And you realize, because of our history, particularly during the last century, that there's so much activity here, from, you know, the fallout from nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands to the war, to the amount of contaminants that have been, you know, essentially dug and dumped into our ground. I mean, the fact that, you know, Anderson was a number of years ago, 30 plus years ago, put in the national priorities listing was because of the concern about the quality of our drinking water, because of the amount of contaminants back then, when many were not as conscious or aware of the importance of environmental protection and how that related to our health. You know, I've seen, you know, I was on the Anderson Restoration Advisory Board for 14 years, and I've had an opportunity to see all these areas around Guam. Maybe not all. We probably might not have found all of them, you know, that stretch from Anderson to Naval Station, of the amount of contaminants where they literally, can you imagine that, into the limestone, knowing that the limestone's almost like a sponge that absorbs everything? You know, they'd excavate, sometimes in rows, and they would just deposit this stuff in the ground and bury it. And of course, years later, they're spending millions and millions of dollars to excavate, clean out, and hopefully remediate some of these contaminants that are in the ground. Some that they can't. Some they've simply capped and covered like their landfill, because either the technology is not available or the cost is so cost prohibitive at this time that they're not able to address full cleanup, and they have to constantly monitor these sites. But you know, the reality is the human side of all of this, and how it does affect our health, and how, you know, you worry. You know, is this something we're passing on also to our children, to our grandchildren, to our great-grandchildren? Some that have yet to be born, wondering why in such a small population these ailments are so dominant. And you wonder, if goodness, are we just waiting for, you know, when? If we don't have cancer ourselves, are we just waiting for when we're going to be diagnosed? Including those of our relatives that have moved off island, who have young family members that you would never think that are healthy and robust, and then they get diagnosed with a serious cancer ailment. Is that connected to what happened here, or the exposure of their parents when they lived on Guam? Grew up on Guam? So definitely anything we can do to voice the concerns of our people, because these are real. You know, when you see these are your own people that you've known for many years, that are challenged now with these health issues because of this exposure, they should be recognized. I don't think their needs are any less because they were civilian members of our community and not members of the military, which of course many of them worked side by side and hand in hand with regards to the missions that were here. So by all means, and certainly commend my colleague, Senator Jesse Lujan, for putting this resolution forth, for taking this to the next step. Because I know you too, Madam Speaker, have been very active over the years in saying, hey, let's, you know, you've been out there too to get the attention in the community, going out to these locations and sites and pushing very adamantly for testing, you know, because they want verification. Even though the military itself, when it was convenient in the past, didn't keep the appropriate records. It's like, can we go out and find the evidence in the soil that this contaminant actually was brought into this island and that our people were exposed to it? So in our own way of being able to put this concern on paper and relay this to Congress, so that our people that have been affected by this, who are suffering from the ailments as a result of exposure to Agent Orange, that they can get the support and help they need, because sometimes there's no amount of money, obviously, that can address your health when you're impacted by this, especially in your later years when it makes your life even more challenging and even more difficult on top of, like I said, just the normal aging process. And then even on top of that, to not have the financial support to address the medical challenges that you're going through, or the draining of resources that affect your family. You know, sometimes they choose not to get treatment simply because they don't want to burden their family. And this is not something that our people have brought upon themselves. So certainly anything we can do to bring this to light and advocate for these issues to support our people that have been adversely affected by this exposure is something we most definitely should do. I think it's our responsibility to do so. So with that, I definitely, Madam Speaker, rise in full support. And again, thank my colleague, Senator Lujan, for spearheading this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the resolution, Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Zizou Masi, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the comments of the retiring speaker on how this resolution is important as a statement from the government.
I'm sorry. This is Speaker Terlahi, where I'm not on the screen right now. We are having, again, some very technical difficulties with our audio and microphone equipment. My apologies to the public who are watching. We're going to have to recess again to try to resolve this. So we're going to take a recess until 2 p.m.